Hello and welcome to Media Monitor. I hope your new year has started well. We're coming to you from our Auckland Park studios, as we always do, in Johannesburg on the SABC News Channel, independent and impartial. And as always, Media Monitor is here to analyse your news media, both here at home and abroad. I'm Peter Ndoro. Good morning to you. Thanks for joining us. Here's what you can look forward to on the programme today. We're going to be exploring the media's coverage of the ANC's 107th anniversary and election manifesto over the weekend. We'll also unpack the evolution of the January 8th statement over the past years and what's in this one. But first, let's take a look at what's on the front pages of your newspapers today. The Sunday Times is leading with a story about how President Cyril Ramaphosa's chief lieutenants thwarted plans to embarrass him at yesterday's ANC birthday celebrations in Durban by convincing regional leaders in KwaZulu-Natal not to participate in planned disruptions. The City Press is carrying a story about President Ramaphosa, who is said to be contemplating forming an elders' council in which his predecessors, including President Jacob Zuma and other ANC veterans, could play a constructive role as an advisory body to both the ANC and government. The Sunday Independent also running with a story about the ANC and how the party's week-long mobilization and election campaign paid dividends yesterday, with tens of thousands turning up for a manifesto rally that highlighted the party's support in KwaZulu-Natal. And the KZN's Sunday Tribune says that alliance partners yesterday reacted positively to ANC President Cyril Ramaphosa's election manifesto, but also made their demands quite clear. The weekend Argus in Cape Town is also leading with how the ANC's rallying of support in KZN this past week paid off in the numbers of supporters that showed up at the Moses Mabhida Stadium yesterday. Across our borders, Eswatini's Sunday Observer is carrying a story about how 75 former workers of Vuvulane irrigation farmers were paid their benefits in full last year, with the last payments received mid-December. According to the publication, this sums up the end of a 12-year wait and suffering by former workers. And in West Africa, Nigeria's Daily Trust is reporting that Chief Justice of Nigeria, Justice Walter Samuel Onogohen, will on Monday be arraigned before the Code of Conduct Tribunal over alleged non-declaration of assets. We'll be taking a look at some of those stories in a little bit more detail during the programme. But first, one of the big stories of this week was the ANC's 107th anniversary celebrations and its January 8th statement. The party also unveiled its election manifesto at the Moses Mabhida Stadium yesterday. As expected, the media was there in full force to record the annual event. In the build-up to the big day, there have been conflicting reports that some supporters of former President Jacob Zuma in KwaZulu-Natal were planning to organize parallel events that would be addressed by Zuma himself earlier this week. But Ace Makashule told ANC supporters to keep quiet when the president was going to speak on Saturday. Before we delve into that discussion, let's take a look at this clip about the coverage of the January 8th statement.
Looking at the evolution of January 8th over the past years, has the media been effective in its coverage? And what is Ujano's statement all about from a media's perspective?
Well, it's an indication of what the party will be doing for the next 5 years. As we all know, it sets the tone for the year, of course, each year of, and it's particularly more interesting when it's when the elections are around the corner. I remember the last time I was at the Bombela manifesto launch of the ANC in Mpumalanga. There was a similar kind of excitement, but this time around there's much more excitement around the launch of the ANC's manifesto.
Speaking of excitement, considering the current dynamics, would you say the excitement is equivalent to previous celebrations, considering factionalism that has existed in our province as well as the Northwest, and some expecting some sort of disruptions also to happen? Would you say the excitement is still the same?
Well, the excitement obviously is heightened. The stakes are higher for the party, but I get the sense that a lot of the work that has been done since December 2017 around unity is starting to bear fruit, because if you look at activities this week, there hasn't been any real problematic incident like booing, for example. So it looks very, very promising for the ruling party.
I think the celebrations are very, they always make sure that they're inclusive of the people. Telling stories of the people, from the people themselves. The general public, do they understand what January 8th is for the ANC?
I don't think so, and I don't think it has been explained enough. I don't think enough work has been done to popularize the January 8th statement, its significance, its history. It's a long and deep tradition of the ruling party, and it, as I said, sets the tone for the year in terms of the action plans of the party. So it's quite important, even whether you are a member or a supporter or not of the ruling party.
There's this perception that there's always it's a very sour relationship between the ruling party and the media. What can be done to savor this misconception?
Well, perceptions, you know, when it comes to politics, are seen as a reality, are in fact reality. So those perceptions do need to be managed, they do need to be tackled. I'm not sure of what the solutions would be, but I think a good start would be communication and more communication between the media and the ruling party and the other political parties as well.
Lastly, as an editor, we do get, what would be your message to political reporters who, in a sense, might be affiliated or take sides as far as political parties are concerned?
Well, I mean, the central tenet of journalism is independence and unbiased reporting. It goes straight to your credibility, so you just cannot take sides. So it's quite important that people are reminded of the basics of journalism, but there also needs to be mutual respect from the other side as well. We need, for example, I was chatting to you about what is happening in the United States between Donald Trump and the media in the US. That is not healthy. We need to manage our relationships and deal with issues as they come, but still find a way of getting along.
That was Mazwi Xaba, who's the editor of The Independent on Saturday, giving his thoughts about media coverage, particularly relating to the ANC's 107th celebrations during the course of the week, leading up to, of course, this weekend's January 8th statement and election manifesto launch. But to explore this even further, I'm now joined in studio by two seasoned journalists. Sophie Mkwena, SABC foreign editor, thanks very much for joining us. Welcome.
Thank you, Peter.
And a very good morning to you, Zingiswa Mvumvu, a political reporter, Sunday Times. Thanks very much for joining us.
Good morning to you too, Peter.
All right, so you heard there from Mazwi his thoughts about the ANC celebrations, and I just want to get your initial take about how the media covered the story during the course of the week, because there was a real mobilization that the ANC went on to lead up to what happened yesterday. Your thoughts, Sophie? Let's start with you.
When an announcement was made that the ANC January 8th statement was going to be in KwaZulu-Natal, the big question was, on the backdrop of President Jacob Zuma, the former president of the Republic and the former president of the ANC, who is still aggrieved, what is going to be the strategy for Ramaphosa to manage the ground? We know that, you'd recall that at some point in time when there was a fallout between the two former presidents, Mbeki and Zuma, when Mbeki went to KwaZulu-Natal, you know, he had his guest, the Prime Minister of India. The ANC members in KwaZulu-Natal arrived at the stadium, and ironically, some of them today are senior ANC members in the NEC. Led a group of people who were chanting, and you could see that it was not going to be business as usual for Mbeki. And they started singing and heckling, and after the Prime Minister of India spoke, when Mbeki took to the podium, there was booing, and then they left the stadium. It was an empty stadium. So clearly, everybody was concerned that this might play itself again. Secondly, when Mbeki was attending a function in KwaZulu-Natal as the president of the ANC in the country, then during the reburial of Moses Mabhida, there was a disruption. Again, people talking, making noise, you know. And I remember very well, I can vividly see the pictures, Dr. Nkosazana Zuma being very restless, and he stood up and he went to JZ. And my suspicion, I can't confirm, perhaps she was saying, that's my suspicion, please talk to the people. And I remember at some point in time, if my memory serves me well, there was a time where Zuma was trying to
calm people down.
But you know, he took his time and he was laughing, you could see. Yeah, so I'm saying there was reasons for concern. And it is for that reason people don't understand. I saw editors, South Africans, very angry that, hey, Ramaphosa is reaching out to Zuma. It looks like this Zuma, who is a burden, is still an albatross, and he shouldn't do that. What kind of a president are we going to have? He knew there was no way Ramaphosa would stand up there in KwaZulu-Natal and start criticizing Zuma and saying lots of things. What was going to happen at the rally? You know, so that's how he was able to manage this, because I think also he is trying to move away from what Zuma did, you know, continuing to mobilize behind the scenes his people to really not respect the then former president. So he's trying to reach out to all the former leaders of the ANC. He wants everybody on board, and all factions and all groupings, even South Africa. Right. That's the manifesto.
And so that really was, I guess, what you're saying was the overarching idea about some of the things that we saw during the course of the week.
Yes.
Zingiswa, what are your thoughts?
Well, maybe just to pick up from where Sophie finished, I mean, the Zuma question was always going to be the central point. I mean, he's the big elephant in the room since he left power more than 12 months ago already now in terms of the ANC, but he still remains very critical to the ANC because of the issues that Sophie has articulated. But perhaps on the media side of things, in terms of covering that, I think at times that tends to take us away from business of the manifesto. If you saw this week what the ANC offers in terms of what it's going to deliver to the people who are going to vote for it in the upcoming elections, sort of becomes a by-the-way issue. And these other theatrics of whether Zuma is going to appear, whether Ramaphosa is going to be booed, they take the front stage. And I don't think that is the way to go, but unfortunately that's just politics. But in terms of the meat of what the manifesto launch and the January 8th is about, we get lost into those political theatrics.
Do you think that the importance of the January 8th statement was explained properly to the people? This is the governing party. What they say is quite important because it's going to affect our lives.
Well, indeed, that's where we got it wrong. I mean, we hardly touched on, usually, the preview. Okay, you'll deal with what's likely to happen, the side stories, the juicy stories, breaking news, you know, the reliable source. But you also zoom into what can we expect in this manifesto, looking at Madiba, Begi, Zuma, now Ramaphosa. What can we expect? And we failed on that. Even now, I'm looking at newspapers. I still have to really apply my mind whether we did cover the content of the manifesto, interrogate, critique, if we have to, in terms of, is there anything new in this manifesto that will change the situation right now? I don't know, maybe in the coming week, now that the KZN SA story is now off our minds, we will then focus on what is ANC offering. And I mean, former President Jacob Zuma was always going to be a story. That is his stronghold. We expect people to boo President Ramaphosa. Maybe people thought so. But the reality is President Jacob Zuma, former president, was always going to receive that kind of a warm reception. It was his backyard.
Right. Zingi, so what your thoughts?
Yeah, well, I mean, I agree again with our Sophie, but I mean, maybe again, bringing it back to the media, also what I found interesting, Peter, is the contrast between the mainstream media and social media in terms of the conversation that went on during the week. I mean, you would have seen that some of the pictures that the ANC leaders and the ANC Twitter account posted, they sort of backfired in terms of the PR that they were trying to push. They were posting pictures of ANC leaders in mud houses and all those sorts of things. But the reception by social media was to the contrary of what they would have expected. People criticizing, how is it that ANC leaders 25 years later still feel proud to post pictures like that instead of having done something about it and change the material conditions of the people. So I found that to be interesting as well, in that social media was on a different path in terms of the discussions in the preparations to this manifesto. And I think then that is where what Alsof is saying in terms of the media delving into the policy. How is the ANC going to change those conditions? What are their concrete plans? Because, for instance, when I was listening, for me, there's nothing concrete. The ANC is
I'm going to pause you there, because after the break, I want us to get into the January 8th statement itself. But it is interesting what you said about social media. And what I'm starting to find more and more is that for the first time, the citizens will give you feedback straight away as you're speaking directly. And it changes everything that you're saying. But we'll explore that a little bit further after this break, when we look in a little bit more detail what was said by the president yesterday.
We are at the forefront of Africa's tech discussion.
We're already planning for the 5G spectrum to be licensed by 2020.
In Mauritius, for fiber migration, we had a strategy. On network, we have gadgets, robots, and more.
We focus on investing in entrepreneurs and technology in emerging markets.
There's technology and social media news on Network with me, Spumelele Zondi, every Saturday at 8:30 p.m. and every Sunday at 5:30 p.m.
Buildings, submerged homes and devastated families.
Biggest earthquake in here.
Their homes and buildings moved like boats.
Big shake, and I ran as fast as I can.
These are the satellite images depicting the area before the disaster.
The ground is like a wave.
I've never seen anything like this in my life.
It is unbelievable. You can actually smell the stench of dead bodies around.
The National Hurricane Center said earlier on Tuesday that Michael was a Category 1 storm with sustained winds of up to 150 kilometers per hour. Residents were implored to get out of harm's way ahead of life-threatening waves, winds and rains. Flash flooding over the weekend caused 13 deaths in Central America after Michael formed off the coast of northern Honduras.
Welcome back. You're still watching Media Monitor. Now, it's time to take a look at actually what was said by the President yesterday of the ANC, President Cyril Ramaphosa. Did the January 8th statement say enough for you to be confident that this is the party that you need to vote for the next 5 years? Well, let's find out from our pro-journalists here. Your thoughts first in broad terms, and then we'll break it down. The January 8th statement from the ANC, did it inspire? Did it pave new ground? What was it?
The January 8th statement tried to mobilize and rally the ANC because that's the aim. But the manifesto, it was just a summary yesterday. It didn't touch on details. Perhaps we have to go back and look at the real document, the real thick document of the manifesto, what's contained in that. But my suspicion, looking at the summary yesterday, it's emphasis rather than new grounds and new strategies. But secondly, we know the problems of this country. The problem is implementation. Solutions and suggestions are there, not only from politicians, but also from ordinary people as well, but the implementation. So the question is, whoever becomes the president after the elections this year, irrespective of party, color, political inclination, will you, whoever is going to be our president after 2019 election, going to be able to take us somewhere? We are stuck in a rut.
So the issue really is proof that it can be done, not so much what you're suggesting we should do.
Absolutely, absolutely, Peter. Also, what I find interesting, in the manifesto is that the ANC sort of always becomes detailed when it comes to what it has done. But even so, it becomes selective. I mean, I'll just make an example from the manifesto. When the president says 7 more million people have been employed since 1994, but he deliberately doesn't state that since then the population has grew by 18 million, which is an important detail to such a statement. But when it comes to promises about what he plans to do in the future, it lacks detail, as also is saying. There is no detail. They will just say, yeah, we'll do 1.3, we'll raise 1.3 investment in the next 5 years, but the how are you going to do that? 270,000 jobs every year for the coming years. How are you going to do that? It doesn't state the detail when it comes to promises. It is just, sort of superficial at the face of it. So that's what I found.
You mentioned jobs, and this is a thing I'm going to put to you as journalists. The president talks about an additional 275,000 jobs each year, creating new jobs, and he says that will double the creation rate. So let's assume that's 500,000 new jobs each year being created. 1 million people are turning 18 every year, which means they'll never catch up. And in fact, if we stopped giving birth, it would take us something like 18 years just to employ the people that are currently unemployed, because I think further down he talks about 10 million people in real terms that are unemployed. Is this something that we should be, as journalists, explaining behind what we're being told by the politicians?
This is the problem that is facing the continent right now. It's not a unique problem to South Africa. When you look at the IMF and the World Bank report, it says in terms of South Africa and in terms of Africa or the Sub-Sahara region, the population is growing, and it looks like the leaders or whoever is in charge or people who must address the issue of unemployment are battling to pull synergy between the growing population and also the creation of jobs. And the other issue is that you have a very young population on the continent. Therefore, every year you have these numbers coming up, and it is very difficult for us as a continent to keep up pace with what's happening. Therefore, we need a proper strategy. How are we going to deal with that? And with the fourth industrial revolution looking at us right now, the machines coming, how is this going to impact on the issue of population growth, and particularly the youth on the continent? So do we have to plan better? Do we have a strategy to counter this? I'm not so sure.
I mean, the only way really is to double the economy. That's the short and long of it, isn't it?
And that is why when you look at Ramaphosa's statement, and I think the January 8, but also his previous opening of Parliament, the State of the Nation and the coming State of the Nation, the synergy for me, it has been his focus is to grow the economy. Even when you look at the let's work together to grow South Africa. What South Africa? The economy. And the 1.2 trillion, how far are we? What have we done in terms of what we have got right now in terms of money or the investors who are in the country? Are we making a dent?
Okay, Zingiso?
Yeah, well, Peter, for me also, I think the government must stop, this thing of creating an impression that it is a job creator. Because in actual fact, the government, other than the administrative people who work for government is not an employer. What the government ought to do is to create an environment that is enabling for employment and business to thrive and the economy to thrive. And its role in creating that enabling environment, part of it is what Ausuf was saying in terms of, do our young people have the right skills? I mean, just now we had matric results coming out, everyone was celebrating, but we didn't ask the critical questions. These ones who passed, did they pass maths and science, which is what is needed for one to pursue the skills that are needed in this day and age to take the country forward, to take our economy forward? I mean, you can't celebrate scores of people who pass history. They are not needed by this economy, unfortunately. I mean, most of the jobs that we have today in the next 5 years or so are going to be irrelevant. So those are the things that the government ought to focus on and create proper regulation that is lax to a certain degree for business to thrive, for the economy to thrive.
He did talk about growing skills, though. He did talk about re-engineering the kind of skills that people are being taught. Interesting for me is, after he did the protocols of welcoming everybody, his third sentence, he talked about land. And I wonder if this is the flag upon which they're going to be campaigning going to the elections. But even then, the language he used in terms of how he was going to deal with land was quite careful. Sophie?
Yes, trying to, ensure that all South Africans are happy. It is for that reason talks about consultation, a range of ways of doing it, trying to accommodate everybody. But then, unfortunately, other parties are going to launch their manifestos very soon. Some have a latitude, a luxury to go very radical. Therefore, how is the ANC going to manage that? Clearly, AfriForum is angry in terms of how we are handling issues. Now, when you look at Freedom Front Plus, will the Freedom Front Plus, which is in Parliament, going to agree to a radical text of how we are going to address the issue of the land? It's going to be a problem. And then you have the EFF. The EFF is not going to be diplomatic. And then the whole game is going to change, and the ANC will have to adapt. How is ANC going to navigate this challenge, where you have different South Africans who have different views and interests, and also our historic perspective? Those who are disadvantaged, they want a radical text. You have those who are in an advantaged position. They don't want to hear anything that is radical.
It is a difficult one because, as Sophie was saying, it sounds as if he's trying to please everybody, and you can't do that with an issue as emotive as this one.
Unfortunately, that's exactly the situation. And I mean, if you you analyze President Ramaphosa's leadership style generally, that's how he operates. He sort of tries not to step on any toes. It's a strategic style of leadership, but it can prove costly at times as well, because I mean, this land issue has been in the forefront for the longest time now, and people want it to be resolved once and for all. But unfortunately, the ANC, I don't think the ANC would be entertaining this question where the EFF not in existence. But it sort of feels itself pushed and pressed into a corner by EFF, which is more radical and precise about what they want to do with the issues of land. So, and the ANC, being the ANC, non-racial, for prosperous, it always tries to thread carefully on issues like this so that it doesn't offend any section of society, whereas for the EFF, it's a one-way go, but they know the importance of this issue, so they sort of always have to touch on it, although mostly they are not clear about exactly what they want to do. So maybe it works, maybe it can backfire.
We'll know in May whether it worked or not. Okay, we're going to take another quick break, and when we come back, we'll continue more on Media Monitor.
To be a part of something like this makes me proud, and I think that to be able to report the news in a fair, just, independent and impartial way is what the public broadcaster stands for.
To be part of the SABC News team means
tell an independent and impartial African story.
I'm proud to be part of the SABC News team,
bringing business news to the man on the street and the executive in the boardroom.
We expose challenges faced by communities on a daily basis.
It is to take you behind the headlines, to show you the faces and take you to the places that make this country beautiful.
And that's the power of the SABC, to go beyond the story.
I am SABC News.
I am SABC News.
I am SABC News.
And I am SABC News.
Hello and welcome to Trends Travel and welcome to 2019. We thought we'd start this year off by looking at the year that was.
Food has been something that we enjoyed at my home. My dad was a great cook and taught me most of the skills that I know in the kitchen.
So we know the year has just started and there's no reason that all your holidaymakers should be stressed at all. But just in case you are, here's us taking it back to nature to learn how to relax.
Welcome back. Now we're going to tackle a very interesting subject for me in particular. What does the media decide to show? How do we choose the stories that get onto your front pages of your newspapers and also that we cover as broadcast media? Well, the media coverage, for example, of Mzwanele Manyi's announcement of his new political party gained some traction. But I want to take you back to last year because there was a former SABC COO who launched a particular party, and Claudia Motsoeneng, he's always quite vocal, but the media was there in full force. Let's take a look at the launch and then we'll discuss whether we should have been there in the first place.
Realize that all these political parties, they are not assisting South Africa. When I was at the SABC, they removed me because they realized that I was changing the lives of ordinary citizens of South Africa.
So one of my favorite clips in that was fresh air.
Yeah,
fresh air. So now the question that people might have might be, should the media have gone out in full force to this particular launch of this party by this person? Let's start with you, Zingiswa, this time.
Well, I'm sorry. I don't know. I don't know. But I don't know about the newsworthiness of Mr. Claudia Motsoeneng. But generally, our coverage of events in South Africa today is about the who than anything else. And when it comes to that, I mean, as you just said, Mr. Claudia Motsoeneng being Mr. Claudia Motsoeneng, in terms of the who, he fits all the criterion. He's someone who was at the SABC. There was a lot around him when he was here at the SABC. But him moving to politics, he was not a politician at SABC. He was a functionary administrator as the COO. But also that change from that to a politician, it's a bit interesting. You almost always want to know what motivated it. I mean, is it genuine, or is it just one of Mr. Hlauri's I'm here, look at me kind of situation? So in the broader scheme of things, there was a need to cover it, but I mean, it wouldn't really get the prominence that I think it got, because in the bigger scheme of things, there's nothing to it. I believe so.
But perhaps, Sophie, we're not dealing with an ordinary person here, and that might have been the reason, because this was a person who ran a major corporation, who was the subject of a number of inquiries, and still, so it wasn't an ordinary citizen. Might that have been the justification?
Also, we must remember in 2014, during the national elections, when Julius Malema and them decided to form the EFF, SABC was caught in a very ugly spat in terms of whether we should cover Malema, because then he didn't even have constituency, he hadn't set up structures, there was no conference, there was no formal structure. Secondly, was not in parliament. What formula are you using? But the reality was that you are dealing with Malema, and Malema was not going to be history, you know. And look where we are today. They are still there. They are in parliament. We've just spoken about the land question and how they are going to mess up everybody in terms of their radical position on the land question with the coming elections. So the same with Hlaudi Motsoeneng. You may like him, we may hate him, it's not a problem. The reality is he is controversial. I mean, he is still in the news based on the court cases. You know, he's still going to court every month, you know, every month, you know. So he's still a story. The reality is we have to unpack and critique and do a proper story and ignore the drama and what. The question we must ask, does Hlaudi has constituency? If so, where? And what would be the reason for him to think that he can get voters? Secondly, we know that he was associated with certain politicians. Are they behind this? Are they going to work with him? And he has opened offices in Johannesburg. Where did he get money? He is in partnership with certain political parties in the West Rand. Who are these people? What's the game plan? ACM, ATM, there's a story to tell. The problem with ATM is that indeed, Mzwane Lemani, I don't think it was right now. Because it was, I'm joining the party, not I'm starting the party.
We'll get to him just now, because that's another interesting case. I'm quite fascinated by the way he got us to the conference. But in between that, BLF, they've been around for some time. They also have perhaps enjoyed much more media than people might say they deserve, because they're not in parliament. They're beyond a startup now, but they doesn't seem, I don't know whether there's a constituency there, but still they get media coverage.
Well, Peter, I don't think constituency, you can determine a constituency, especially when it comes to parties that are not in parliament yet, because they wouldn't have contested elections to gauge what sort of support they say they have. However, what they say is what matters the most. For instance, BLF is very vocal on the land question, which is the most critical question in our political discourse, especially most of 2019 and now going into the elections. They are among the front runners in terms of how they formulate their debate around that question. So that alone, I think it gives them...
Is it not the media that legitimizes them by giving them the platform? Because many people talk about land. Why focus on this group and not another?
But it is a political party that is going to contest in the upcoming elections with the hopes of going to parliament, where policy is formulated.
Or influenced.
Or influenced. So for people like that who are going to parliament, who probably will be part of the ongoing process in parliament on the land question. So in that regard, I believe
some people might say Azapo has been speaking about land forever, but don't get as much coverage maybe as the BLF.
What are they doing? Are they inviting the media? Are they sending those media statements? Remember, for media to go to a press conference, they don't just create a press conference. We don't just ask political parties, please, can we have a press conference? We want to come. They do it. They send media invites. We go there. we look at what they're saying, and based on content, we decide this is a story or this is not a story. Therefore, political parties must be proactive. The land question, whoever speaks about land, even private citizens, media do capture the views of ordinary people, because it is the issue currently, not only in South Africa, but in the SADC region. Namibia is currently dealing with the land question. We know what happened in Zimbabwe. Therefore, as media, at times we get it wrong, truth be told, but the reality is the interest of the media is to tell a story in most cases. Yes, there are mistakes here and there. There are conflict of interest here and there. But when you look at the principle in general, you can't say, I am not going to cover Musi Maimane because there's no story there.
Okay.
You must actually interrogate the fact that Musi has invited you to the press conference and he didn't say anything, whereas in the DA, this is what is happening.
All right, so let's go to the other person that you gave us a clue about just now, a party called the ATM. So what Mzwanele Manyi did, which was, I thought, quite clever, and that's the use of social media, in the lead up to this announcement, he started a series of tweets, and he says, you know, at 9 o'clock tonight, we'll be making an announcement, watch this space. 9 o'clock, of course, I was there, and guess what? There was no announcement at that point, and later on he did countdown, and he created this mystery, he created this, is he starting a new party? Who is it with? And then a picture started floating around with him and Floyd Shivambu, and people started to think, hang on, is this a merger? Is he leaving EFF? And then cryptically, Julius Malema says, betrayal, betrayal. So people were curious. But he carried on, he did his tweets. And then eventually, of course, what did he do? He had this press conference, and we were waiting for this announcement. And when the announcement came, he said, I'm joining this party called ATM. So my question to you, again, former government spokesperson, head of government communications, former owner of AfroView TV, and associated with certain political players and family businesses. Was this a big enough story for all the media to go and listen to what he had to say?
The question should be, how did we miss ATM? As journalists, because this party has been there for almost 6 months now. I've been following this party on social media. I remember one day I saw a video clip when they were in Oguruleni at the stadium, and I was asking myself, is this a political party? Is this a church? Is this a sort of stock fair? Because they also talk about empowerment. What is this? And then I saw that they want to contest elections. We missed that. The story should have been, who is ATM? Mzwandile Manyi should have been, yes, he has joined ATM, but who is ATM?
Well, Brother Peter, I think there was a need on this one. I mean, again, coming to the character that is Mzwanele Manyi, there's a lot around him that is of importance that is going on. We know, as you say, some of the people he was associated with, the Guptas, so to speak, and his alleged involvement in the state capture. He appeared at the State Capture Commission towards the end of last year. So characters like that, he was in government spokesperson, you almost always want to know. I mean, given his alleged implication in state capture, you would want to know, why is he starting a party? Is this a way of, is it part of the fight back? You remember that we've reported before about the state capture fight back. Would this be part of it by those implicated in the state capture to take our attention away from the real issues that they have to answer to? So it was something that generated a lot of interest.
So again, not an ordinary citizen. He's not just another person starting another party.
Yeah, but that should have been the story, that who is ATM?
Yeah.
Mzwanele, why join ATM? Who are you? And your role and your background and the, you know, the whole issue of state capture. How will this affect this new party? Because remember, he went to the state capture, he said his side of the story, people continue, some of them mentioning his name. The judge finally will decide. We don't know who's right, who's wrong right now, but his name is making the rounds. We can't judge for now. your link, is this not going to impact on the new party ATM? And who's the leader of the ATM? Even now, who's the leader of ATM, Peter?
How did we miss the story of the ATM, Zingis?
Well, it's quite interesting what Sophie is saying. I mean, I guess it comes back again to say us, in the main, as the media, we focus on the who. Yeah. The characters, the faces,
individuals.
You know, because I mean, for the ATM to have been there for that long, and many people didn't know about it. I mean, the reaction on social media was quite clear that people didn't know about it. And why did they not know? It's because the media was not there. But you see now, the media suddenly is going to change and give ATM the mileage because of this Jimmy man. Okay, you see, so all the time we get defocused on the real issues. For instance, we haven't discussed much about what is the policy of the ATM and how is it different from the players that have been there. But now that there's Jimmy man, even our focus on the ATM is not going to be about what they offer. It's going to be about Jimmy man.
What position is he going to take?
And I mean, the death penalty. We know that it was outlawed because the decision by the Constitutional Court. We are supposed to be focusing on ATM is saying this because they know very well that currently South Africans are angry in terms of the levels of crime in the country. And maybe they are using this issue that is so close to the hearts of many South Africans, like the land question, to launch themselves. But Mzwanele Manye, such an educated person, as we are told, can you really not understand, or you don't know what the Constitutional Court said about the death penalty? The whole world, many countries, they don't have death penalty anymore. And those countries that still has death penalty as a punishment are constantly being criticized by the international human rights organizations. How are you going to navigate this?
And also there's a church feeling around ATM that hasn't been investigated. Maybe that could explain
Thou
the
shalt
numbers.
not kill. Thou shalt not kill. The contradiction.
So are we not, because earlier on you suggested that inviters to your press conferences will come. Is it that the ATM did not invite us to press conferences before, that we didn't know about it? And then the question then becomes, must journalists wait for press conferences to tell stories?
I told you I saw the party on the Facebook.
Yes.
Why we didn't pick it up as journalists?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Go to Facebook now and check their videos.
Yeah. And it doesn't always have to be an invite. I mean, we ourselves as political reporters, we should always be on the ground, up and about, checking the latest, what is happening, who's plotting what, who's trying this and that, and we would always come across these issues. But I guess at times we have this mentality of being fixated on this so-called big three, being the ANC, EFF, and the DA. I mean, we are far from getting to the point where we assume that something in the upcoming elections, something unexpected could happen. For instance, just make an example. What if ATM really wins the elections? We are not of that mentality. Hence, we don't give them much attention. We're of the view that there'll always be these three main players. The rest will always be down there in the equation.
I want us to look at the papers just now, but very quickly, both of you, I just wonder. I mean, we've got ACM, ATM. We have a new Labour Party, is it NUMSA?
Yeah.
We have got the Good Party that's come through.
Taxi.
Who's going to be affected the most by these new organizations in terms of loss? Because someone has to lose for them to gain.
I think, without a doubt, it is the ANC. I mean, mostly the people who formed these parties were in the ANC. Some of them were leaders, some of them were branch leaders, but most of the people who launch new parties are always from within the ANC. And whatever form of support, no matter how small, that they have as individuals, is normally from people who are within the ANC. So in the main, mostly it affects the ANC when there are these splinter parties in terms of dropping their support. And I would like to think that that is the bigger strategy for some of these parties. You would find that some of them are actually one thing. This thing was decided somewhere, but the decision was that let us split it to as many parties as possible. You know what I'm saying? To reduce the support of the ANC. That's what it smells like. That's what it seems like to me.
Okay.
Yes, some of them are just proxies for certain
Really?
people who are aggrieved. We know. I mean, really. And you are correct to say the ANC has to do a lot of work to ensure that the formation of ACM or ATM doesn't affect its constituency support, the Taxi Alliance, what organization, you know. And when you look at this, these are predominantly African groupings, and therefore the ANC might suffer some setbacks. But the DA is also in trouble.
Yeah.
The DA is in serious trouble because of the fallout internally with Patricia Delil and Musi Maimane trying to manage everybody. And finally, Ramaphosa being, you know, on a charm offensive to the middle class and the, you know, the young population, and it looks like...
All right, very quickly, let's just, a couple of stories maybe that drew your attention. Sunday Times, what did you go with and why?
Well, on the Sunday Times, I mean, their coverage generally of the ANC issues around the manifesto, I think it was quite spot on. I mean, as we were discussing earlier, the focal point, which was the issue around whether there will be booing of the president and whether Zuma is going to receive the loudest cheers. I mean, everyone was focused on that, and I think they go into detail. Sunday Times goes into detail about how, you know, those senior figures in the ANC worked hard in the background to make sure that doesn't happen, and eventually it didn't happen at all.
Sophie, you're our foreign editor. I know you've got stories locally that you might have wanted to look at, but I want to ask you, we've got these elders that might be deployed to solve some problems on the continent. DRC's just had an election. Sudan is having its challenges. And we've seen in this last week internet shutdowns as well. Your thoughts about where the elders probably going to be best deployed and what these issues are?
They can do so much, but you are going to experience problems. No country can just accept a person, the whole population. I just want to make an example of the DRC. When President Ramaphosa gave an indication that he would want former President Thabo Mbeki to be an envoy in the DRC, the proposal was rejected by Kabila because he had an agenda. How can Kabila today tell us that he doesn't trust Mbeki when Mbeki assisted him to create an environment where he became the president of the DRC with the Congolese dialogue, South Africa paying such a lot of money in Sun City, you know? And now today he comes and he tells us that he doesn't trust Thabo. What has changed? We know what has changed. It's conflict of interest because certain South Africans have invested in the DRC and he's trying to maybe they had influence, being scared that this matter will finally be in the public domain. I'm saying, so it is going to be difficult how he deployed Thabo or President Zuma or former
As always,
President.
we always run out of time, unfortunately, but to both of you, thanks so much indeed for joining us and sharing your insights with us about these big issues. And you at home, thanks very much indeed for joining us. And I hope 2019 is a blessed one. If you haven't registered to vote, go out there. It is your duty to vote and determine the course of our country for the next 5 years. Have a great week, everybody. We'll see you next week at the same time. Bye-bye.